So what is the symbolism behind the movie Lamb? If you don't already know, Lamb's a movie about a couple that raises a hybrid half-human, half-lamb. And besides the fact that the lamb is so stinking cute, it's a powerful metaphor about motherhood, grief, and the relationship between humans and nature. After the mom Maria experiences the loss of her human daughter named Ada, she views the birth of this cute little freak as a second chance at motherhood. She names the sheep hybrid Ada after her daughter that passed away, and selfishly appropriates it as her own child due to grief and denial, even going as far as unaliving the hybrid's actual sheep mom out of jealousy. It's a symbolic representation of mankind's tendency to disrespect nature for their own selfish needs. At the end, the Ram Man, which is the hybrid's biological father, takes back the hybrid as his own child and unalives Maria's husband, representing nature's wrath and anger towards humans for how they treat nature. The Ram Man could also represent denial because Maria knew the whole time that wasn't actually her child and would eventually be taken away from her. The Ram Man was also created because the director said he once had a nightmare about a giant ram. There's also the theory that the hybrid was all just a part of the mom's imagination as a direct result of grief, as the husband had to watch his wife spiral and treat the lamb as her own child. And of course there's the biblical reference to all of this, where the lamb represents the Lamb of God, with Maria representing Mary and Peter representing the Apostle Peter. This is all just my interpretation of the film and also based off some stuff the director said during a Q&A, but it can be interpreted many different ways. What are your thoughts on this?
Morbidly Wholesome Facts, Part 63. Keanu Reeves' sister Kim was diagnosed with the deadly blood cancer leukemia in 1991. In response, he sold his home to move closer to her, cleaned her house, cooked her meals, and provided all of her necessary medications. Once she recovered, Keanu started a private charity to fund cancer research in children's hospitals. In 2009, he was interviewed saying, "I don't like to attach my name to it, I just let the foundation do what it does." Frank Sinatra died the night of Seinfeld's finale, and his ambulance made it to the hospital in record time since there was no traffic due to everyone watching the show. Hans Scharf, the most successful Nazi interrogator in World War II, never physically harmed an enemy soldier. Instead, he treated them with respect and kindness, taking them for walks, letting them visit their captured comrades in the hospital, and even letting captured pilots go on test flights. His methods were very successful since virtually everyone ended up talking.
I created hundreds of movies to spread satanic propaganda to children. I am Walt Disney. Watch until the end, as I will reveal something insane. In 1920, I produced my first movie, and as I made more and more movies, things weren't going too well. One day, while I was in a bar in California, someone approached me and explained that he could help me make my films extremely famous if I signed a deal with the devil and spread satanic beliefs in my movies. I quickly accepted, as I would have done anything to finally have the recognition I thought I really deserved. From that day, I depicted satanic symbols such as the devil horn or demonic rituals in all of my movies. But this isn't the craziest part. In 1966, I got extremely sick, and as I was going to pass away, my body was frozen. But in early 2012, a rumor spread about my body being conserved. So Disney released a movie called Frozen. So when someone would look up Disney Frozen online, they would only find the movie. Subscribe and send to a friend for part 2 with more details. Now you know.
Freaking Native Americans were like 7 feet tall, dude. Scary.
They were tall when Europeans were very short back then.
Dude, if we were back in Europe back in the day,
You'd be crushing it, dude.
yeah.
You'd be crushing it.
Girls back then are like, I don't date a guy that's not at least 5'3".
What's up, Paul Bunyan's here, baby?
How tall are you?
5'8". 5'8".
Wow. So tall.
You're kidding me. That's 5 inches taller than my previous husband.
Who died from the plague.
Breaking news, former NFL player Sergio Brown has officially been arrested for taking the life of his mother. Authorities say Sergio Brown was arrested for first-degree murder in connection to his mother's death on Tuesday. As you may remember, he was seen partying in Mexico just days after she was pronounced deceased. He was deported from the country on Tuesday and taken into custody near San Diego. Mayfield police said an arrest warrant was issued in Illinois. At this time, they are working to transfer the former NFL player from Southern California to Chicago. I'll keep you guys updated. What do you think? Drop in the comments.
They found out that chimpanzees, they're starting their own religion.
Chimpanzees?
Yes, fam.
Wait, what?
Like,
what kind of religion?
No, it's crazy. Yeah. So they studied and they realized
Like they
after
worship
studying,
the banana.
I don't know, but they have footage and shit. Chimpanzees have a ritual of picking up a rock and slamming it at a tree and then getting excited.
Oh, what the?
But But they would all do it.
Yeah.
It's like, it's almost become a culture.
So that's like their sign of the cross. So it's
Like, who knows? Who knows? But it's a phenomenon because everybody starts doing it. Like, once one starts, all of them start doing it, and then they do it together.
So it is a cult, yeah.
So isn't it crazy that there's some sort of like to worship something or to ritualize something in all humans?
Remember it was like a gorilla or ape that was warning us that the world is ending?
Coco the gorilla?
Coco, fam.
This is Every Woman Killed by Jack the Ripper, Part 1. Hello, folks. Anyone who knows me knows that I have an unhealthy fixation with the Whitechapel murders, and I also happen to work in Whitechapel. So let me take you out on my lunch break to show you the real story of the 5 women who were murdered by the killer known as Jack the Ripper. This is Osborne Street, the last place that Polly Nichols was ever seen alive. Polly was born into poverty here, in the toxic black smog of Fleet Street. And she was married right here, in St. Bread's Church, when she was 18, to a machinist called William. William was a serial adulterer and physically abusive, but that wasn't yet grounds for divorce, so Polly had no choice but to endure or leave, and she bravely left for the workhouse in 1880. Polly spent the remaining 8 years of her life drifting between Lambeth Workhouse and the pavement in Trafalgar Square. During this time, she grew completely dependent on alcohol. And in 1888, she arrived here in Whitechapel, by all accounts the worst slum in the city. On the night of her murder, she visited the Frying Pan Pub, which was right here on Brick Lane. Polly arrived back at her lodging house, but didn't have the money for her bed and was ordered to leave. She was last seen alive by her roommate, Emily Holland, right here wandering down Osborne Street, about an hour before she was killed. Emily recalled that Polly's last words were, "I've had my lodging money 3 times today, and I've spent it. And that just breaks my heart every time." Polly then staggered towards Whitechapel Road aimlessly, finally falling asleep against a stable door on Bucks Row, which is now the station entrance to Whitechapel Overground. And this is where her body was found at 4 a.m. Her throat had been cut, followed by multiple stab wounds to her abdomen and sexual organs. At this point, the profile of the killer was already beginning to form. Whoever did this was interested in more than just instrumental violence. He used expressive violence, using more force than was necessary to just kill her, immediately hinting at a deeper, more twisted motive. And this began the Autumn of Terror. In 1888, forensic science didn't exist, and the police had no suspect, but they knew they were dealing with a new kind of killer, and they were vastly out of their depth. Come back for part 2.
The Schandmantel was primarily constructed from wood and occasionally lined with sheet metal, making it a formidable instrument of humiliation. Its design consisted of a barrel-shaped enclosure with openings for the victim's head and arms. Notably, the device was often weighted along the lower rim and around the neck opening, adding a physical element of punishment to the emotional and psychological torment it inflicted. Victims were compelled to wear the device while being paraded through town squares or other public spaces. During this humiliating procession, they were subjected to insults, mockery, and the hurling of rotten vegetables and other refuse by onlookers. This form of public shaming aimed to disgrace individuals and deter others from committing similar transgressions. The Schandmantel was primarily employed as a means of punishment for 2 main groups: poachers and prostitutes.
It may sound like something straight out of Jurassic Park, but this is all 100% real. Extinct animals that scientists are bringing back, Part 2. The science of cloning and de-extinction has been possible for decades, but there hasn't been the funding or motivation for it until now. A company called Colossal Biosciences has put together a team of scientists specialized in the field of de-extinction. And the first animal species they plan on reviving is the woolly mammoth. They'll be implanting embryos into Asian elephants using artificial wombs, existing mammoth DNA, and CRISPR technology. The company hopes that reintroducing these animals to the tundras will help make the Arctic colder by packing down the snow and slowing down the melting of the permafrost. They plan on starting with 100 woolly mammoths in a Siberian area called Pleistocene Park, and are hoping that millions of mammoths will end up taking back the Arctic within the next few decades. Colossal is striving to birth the first one by the end of 2024, and the company plans on completing its project by 2027.
Of course I can spoil Saw X for you. If you do not want the entire Saw X movie spoiled, don't watch this video. Feel free to discuss more details in the comments. Saw X full spoilers, here we go. The movie starts off with John Kramer, who's told he only has a few months to live due to terminal brain cancer. While at the hospital, he sees a custodian stealing from another patient. John has a vision of the custodian in a trap where he has to turn a dial in order to obliterate all of his fingers back, in order to avoid both of his eyes going bye-bye through a vacuum tube. In the vision, the custodian takes an L in the the form of both of his eyes. John then meets this man named Henry who also claims to have terminal cancer. But the next time John runs into him, Henry's all of a sudden healthy. He claims to have been cured by an experimental Norwegian cancer treatment that's run by this woman named Cecilia in Mexico City. John is driven to the clinic and meets Gabriella, who claims she was cured by Cecilia, as well as 3 other healthcare workers who will be performing the surgery. John also meets a young boy named Carlos who lives nearby. He helps Carlos fix his bike, and Carlos teaches John how to say pole in Spanish. John also meets this patient named Parker who claims that he just had a successful surgery. During the surgery, John drifts in and out of consciousness and notices that one of the nurses is acting kind of sus. John wakes up and is told the procedure was successful and he is now cancer-free. He goes to the store to buy some gifts for Gabriella, but when he gets back to the clinic, he finds that it's been abandoned, so his gut feeling tells him to take the bandages off of his head, revealing that he never had surgery and it was all a scam. The movie reveals that the fake medical staff were all just down bad people in really bad situations where they'll do anything to make money. John then snatches up this man named Diego, who is pretending to be his doctor and taxi driver. John inserts Diego into a trap where he has these things that can go boom threaded under his skin. He needs to really dig in there to remove the wires before the time runs out and becomes obliterated, and he's actually successful with it. John's apprentice named Amanda Young then snatches up Cecilia and the 3 other people who were involved in the scam. The 4 wake up prisoner by chains in the clinic, where John and Amanda greet them as the subjects of Jigsaw's latest game. For those of you who don't know, John is Jigsaw. Watch the previous spoiler on my page of the first Saw for more context on him. John is punishing Cecilia and the others for scamming hundreds of thousands of dollars out of people who are terminally ill. A girl named Valentina is then placed in a trap where she needs to use a fancy saw in order to make half of her leg go bye-bye so that she can extract the marrow out in order to release a key to free herself. And if she doesn't do it in time, her noggin will go bye-bye. Yeah, she doesn't make it. While John and Amanda aren't looking, Cecilia attempts to reach the phone in the middle of the room to call for help. She does so by snipping into Valentina's tummy-wummy and creates a rope out of her digestive system and actually calls someone before Amanda zaps her and confiscates the phone. Then the same patient we saw earlier named Parker tries breaking into the clinic demanding his money back. Amanda captures him and keeps him in a room because he's already seen too much. And meanwhile, Mateo, who was also part of the scam, is placed into a trap while he has to perform surgery on his own noggin, no pain meds, nothing, and remove a big enough chunk of that so it can dissolve in order to obtain a key to escape. Mateo fails and this heated mask unalives him by closing on his face. Gabriella is then placed in a trap where she's up in the air, suspended from shackles while being subjected to that. The only way to remove the shackles is by whack-a-moling her ankle and wrist with a weapon until they finally come off, and she succeeds, but barely and with a lot of injuries. John tells Amanda to take Gabriella to the hospital because she won the game fair and square and he's a good guy with good morals. But then Parker breaks free and reveals himself as Cecilia's lover, so this was all just a trick and he was never a real patient. Before Gabriella is taken to a hospital, Cecilia unalives her with her shoe just for the pure sake of being evil. Cecilia hears Carlos playing soccer outside of the facility and lures him in and forces him and John onto a seesaw-like trap that the red liquid is poured onto whoever pulls the lever that's on the seesaw, and because Carlos taught John how to say pull in Spanish earlier, John can now tell Carlos not to pull, sacrificing himself in order to save Carlos. But Carlos ends up pulling the lever in order to save John. While this is happening, John's sidekick Amanda is restrained, and Cecilia and Parker go to grab the money from the scam from the safe. However, John is a genius and prepared for this to happen because a tripwire is activated that traps Parker and Cecilia in the room while John and Carlos become free. The trap that Cecilia and Parker are now in is that they're in a room that has gas that could unalive them in a few minutes. But there's only one ventilation hole big enough for only one person's head to fit through, so one of them has to unalive the other in order to secure a spot at sticking their head through the hole. Cecilia unalives Parker as she watches John, Amanda, and Carlos leave the facility with her money as she stays there as a prisoner. The end. There's also a mid-credit scene about Henry. Let me know if you want me to talk about it in the comments.
It seems like there are a couple of resident experts on the subject, but none of these experts talk to each other. It's very compartmentalized. At least for me, it is extremely hard to figure out who is actually a resident expert, who just says they are. And another thing is, why aren't these experts talking to each other? If the common goal here is disclosure, how do we know who's the real deal, who isn't? How are you guys deciphering who the real resident experts are?
Well, that's tough. That's why I don't jump on the first train that comes down the tracks. Feel like there's some false flags. feel like some people have briefed me on stuff that's not accurate, but they think it's accurate.
Okay.
So they take an oath up to their knowledge. It's real.
Back in the VMAs, Miley Cyrus was hosting VMAs. She was like doing a call out to everybody in the crowd. They're like, oh, we got The Weeknd.
Oh, yeah.
We got
And then,
Justin Bieber.
Yeah.
And then one of them, she said, and this was what made headlines.
Yeah.
Where she said, shout out ASAP Rocker.
Travis Scott, no?
No, not Travis Scott.
Okay.
But remember when she said,
Oh, ASAP Rocker. Yeah.
Yeah, ASAP Rocker.
Yeah, but
yo.
And then he went like,
Yeah, and then ASAP Rocky's like, stop it. So there's a Mandela effect.
What?
With ASAP Rocky. What do you remember?
What he was wearing?
No, not even that. Plot twist, she never said ASAP Rocker.
No.
Yeah, she never said ASAP Rocker.
No.
Everyone from our era, we all remember that shit.
What the f did she say then?
Look, listen.
No, there's gotta be AI.
I like your swoop. The Weeknd.
The Weeknd.
Yeah.
And they're all cheesed. Remember this?
Yeah.
And ASAP Rocky.
ASAP Rocky. She just said ASAP Rocky.
This is Every Woman Killed by Jack the Ripper, Part 2, Annie Chapman. So a week has passed since Polly's death, and although murder was quite common in Whitechapel, there was a distinct feeling that her case was different. And then, the killer struck again. Annie Chapman was the daughter of a Royal Cavalry soldier. Although they were deeply poor, she grew up around the height of wealth beside Buckingham Palace. Her father's job afforded her a good education, and she had an ambition that she could and would break free from the working class. So she married John Chapman, a baron's coachman in Windsor. He was at the top of the servants' hierarchy, and so they were fortunately given a cottage on a grand country estate. Things were looking up, and they even had these photos taken to show that they were ascending into the middle class. But when 4 of their children died suddenly, they turned to alcohol in their grief. John was just about able to keep his drinking under control, but Annie could not. And when she relapsed for the final time, she was told to leave. Alone, Annie sunk into poverty and ended up in Whitechapel in 1888. On her last day alive, she'd been in the hospital receiving treatment for tuberculosis. She had no money for her lodging house that night and pleaded for a bed, but was turned away. So she snuck into the back garden of 29 Hanbury Street, a crowded slum house which once stood right here, and she tried to sleep. At 5:30 a.m. on a bright, clear September morning, Annie was heard shouting, "No," and her body was soon discovered. Like Polly, her throat had been cut, and she had severe stab wounds to her abdomen, and her uterus was missing. The brutality of their cases sent shockwaves through the city. Whitechapel was densely populated, with 78,000 people living in half a square mile, yet the killer managed to commit these murders out in the open. The police became overwhelmed with hundreds of conflicting statements, and they fumbled. All the while, women in Whitechapel continued to die, which leads us to our next 2 victims, and the night that became known as the double event. Within 1 hour and 1 mile, 2 women in Whitechapel had been murdered. Not only that, but the killer was spotted. Twice. Come back for part 3.
Marion Pruitt, a convicted murderer with a history of violence, requested a substantial and varied last meal before his execution. Marion Pruitt was a notorious criminal responsible for a series of heinous crimes, including kidnappings and murders. His criminal record included the murder of Peggy Lowe during a bank robbery, the murder of Bobby Jean Robertson, a convenience store clerk, and the murders of Anthony Tate and James Balderson, 2 more convenience store clerks. He received death sentences and life imprisonment for these crimes. Pruitt's last meal request drew significant attention due to its size and complexity. His final meal consisted of a stuffed crust pizza from Pizza Hut, 4 Burger King Whoppers, a large order of French fries, 3 2-liter bottles of Pepsi, a bucket of ice, a bottle of ketchup, salt, fried eggplant, fried squash, fried okra, and a pecan pie. Notably, he expressed a desire for a roast duck, but this request was denied by the prison.
Morbid Facts, Part 373. The photo on the right shows a Houston police officer reacting outside the home where Andrea Yates drowned her 5 children in 2001. She started by holding 3 of her boys underwater in her bathtub until they stopped struggling. She then drowned her 6-month-old Mary, whom she left floating in the tub. Her last living child, Noah, soon walked in and asked what was wrong with Mary, then ran when he realized what was going on. But Yates quickly caught up to the 7-year-old and drowned him as well. Afterwards, she laid the lifeless bodies of her children together in her bed. She then called the police, repeatedly saying she needed an officer but refusing to say why. During the trial, the defense argued that Yates was severely mentally ill and not in control of her actions during the murders. She was in a deeply delusional state, believing she needed to murder her children to prevent them from going to hell. In 2006, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed to a high-security mental hospital in Texas, where she remains to this day.
You're telling me nobody else finds it extremely odd that Michael Jackson's doctor only served 2 years for taking his life, but anyone else would get life in prison?
The condemned individual would be securely fastened, usually at their arms and legs, to 4 horses, each facing outward in different directions. Upon the signal, the horses would be driven simultaneously, causing them to move away from each other, thereby exerting immense tension on the restraints binding the victim. The result was the horrific dismemberment of the individual as their limbs were violently torn from their body. Dismemberment by 4 horses served as a brutal form of deterrence, intended to dissuade individuals from engaging in criminal or rebellious activities. Executions involving disruption were often conducted in public squares, attracting crowds of spectators. The origins of dismemberment by 4 horses can be traced back to ancient civilizations. During the Middle Ages, dismemberment by 4 horses gained notoriety in Europe as a means of executing individuals convicted of heinous crimes, acts of treason, or insurrection.
Creepy serial killer quotes, part 3. Hi, I'm Meg. I talk about true crime. Let's get into it. Starting off with Ted Bundy. He was proven to have killed 20 women. He claims 36, but the police think it could be over 100. This is what he had to say. We serial killers are your sons. We are your husbands. We are everywhere. And there will be more of your children dead tomorrow. Pardon? Coming back for part 3 is Albert Fish. I'm currently scripting on Albert Fish right now for a full video, and oh my god, it is the most messed up case I've ever read. Stay tuned! Albert killed between 10 and 100 people, and his quote for part 3 is, "I like children, they are tasty." What the fuck? Next is Dennis Rader, or the BTK killer. He killed 10 people. And he said, "I actually think I may be possessed with demons. I was dropped on my head as a kid. I don't think a drop to the head did this to you, sir. A demon, maybe. But not a drop to the... I don't know, could it? Could it? These serial killers are always blaming demons. Okay, did you ever think that you were the demon?" Next is a woman, Jane Toppin. Toppin? I don't know. She apparently confessed to 31 murders. I need to do a case on her. Here's what Jane had to say. "That is my ambition, to have killed more people. More helpless people than any man or woman who has ever lived." She wanted to be the worst serial killer ever. She failed. Can you imagine being at school and asking a little kid like, "Jane, what do you want to be when you grow up?"
The worst serial killer of all.
Okay, who's next? Next is Richard Ramirez, or the Night Stalker. He killed at least 14 people, and he said, "We've all got the power in our hands to kill, but most people are afraid to use it. The ones who aren't afraid control life itself." Very interesting take. That's gonna be all for today. Make sure you go follow me on Instagram, link in my bio. I see that a lot of you aren't following me on there, so come on now. Follow away, maybe I'll follow you back. If you're new here, like I said, my name's Meg, and welcome. I have loads more true crime videos in this playlist. I also have some other videos. Let me know if you want a part 4, and if you do, I guess I'll see you there.
This is a picture shows a 1,000-mile-long alien mothership from Jupiter. A lot of observers are saying, or it's something that's standing still in front of Jupiter. And it's not an asteroid. It's nothing they can figure out. And some people are saying it might be an alien mothership.
1,000-mile long?
1,000-mile-long mothership that's happening.
Hey, imagine walking that. It'd take you a while.
Yeah, aliens probably have hoverboards, I imagine. Why did they put the food court on the other end? Why would they not put it in the middle?
They got the bird scooters.
You know how all of our technology is nowhere near theirs, right? What if like their minimal technology is like they can't reach our like toilet paper technology?
Dude, I bet you they don't know how to make fire.
That would be
That's
hilarious.
what we got on them. We can shoot lasers. It's like, we have fire.
What is that?
Evacuate!
S'mores.
I don't know if this is gonna get me in trouble or not, but a hot button I have that gets him so mad every time is one time when we started dating. We were eating like a snack.
I can't wait for this.
And he asked me,
Don't do this. She makes this up.
Let her finish it.
he said,
Again.
do you think it's gross when you lick your fingers after a snack? 'Cause my Uncle Brian really thinks it's gross.
What? That's he just asked that question? But he do it like that?
And it sounded like he was in middle school.
It's not true.
This is such a weird thing to bring up.
She just likes to bring it up to make me sound dumb.
He goes,
I didn't do that. Have you ever heard me go,
Do you think it's gross when you lick your fingers after snacks because my Uncle Brian thinks so?
That's exactly how it happened.
Of course I can spoil Lamb for you. This horror movie's literally about a couple who raises a hybrid half-human, half-lamb that goes terribly wrong. Lamb full of spoilers, here we go. The movie starts off with an unknown entity spooking a herd of horses. That same entity makes its way to a barn and does something we don't know to one of the sheep that leaves it exhausted. Now we're introduced to this childless couple, Maria and Ingvar, who live on a secluded farm in Iceland. One day, one of their pregnant sheep gives birth to a human-sheep hybrid that has a human body and a lamb's head and right arm. If I was Maria, I'd be side-eyeing my husband because kinda sus. The couple decides to raise it as their child and names it Ada, but the husband Ingvar isn't really happy about that and has some breakdowns. Ada's biological mother, which is a sheep, always ends up trying to follow Ada inside the house. One day Ada goes missing and Maria finds Ada with its biological sheep mother on one of the hills outside and screams at the sheep mom to go away. It was really cringe. Maria becomes increasingly jealous of Ada's biological sheep mom and eventually unalives her. But little did she know that her husband Ingvar's brother Peter came to visit that day and saw her do that. Peter likes to stay with his brother when he's trying to run away from people he owes money to, so he decides to sleep in their barn. At one point, Peter wakes up to see a full-grown sheep-human hybrid, but thought it was just a dream. The couple then introduces Peter to their child, Ada, but Peter does not approve and says that is an animal, not a child. Peter decides to disrespect Ada by feeding her some grass and pisses the parents off. One day, Peter takes Ada on a walk with the intention to unalive her, but then changes his mind after looking into her cute little eyes. Peter tries to make romantic advances towards Maria, but when she refuses, he blackmails her saying that he saw her unalive Ada's biological sheep mom. Maria then visits a cemetery where it's revealed that she had a daughter named Ada that passed away. So this weirdo is basically having the sheep cosplay as her daughter Ada. One day while the couple and Peter are watching a game, Ada sneaks out of the house and sees a full-grown sheep-human hybrid that we could only see through the reflection in Ada's eyes. Ada then witnesses the sheep person unalive the family dog. The couple still have no idea that this all happened because Ada can't talk. The next morning, Maria drops Peter off at the bus stop and is happy that he's leaving because she cheated on her husband with him. While they're gone, Ingvar takes Ada on a walk and runs into a ram-man hybrid that happens to be Ada's biological father. He then brutally injures Ingvar and forces Ada to come with him as Ada cries over Ingvar. Maria then arrives at the scene very confused as her husband slips away. She holds him in her arms as she grieves the loss of her husband and her missing lamb daughter. The end.